So Grace is the leader of Priceless DAO among a number of other projects. As soon as I started looking her up, I immediately became one of the biggest fangirls. She's amazing. And she's an expert in tokenomics, governance models, and then also the more fuzzy aspect, the implementation, the how to make this go forward. And I know that she's itching to get in here. Tell us a little bit about her learnings and what she knows and how it relates to this conversation that was just ongoing. So Grace, let me hand the floor over to you. We'll let Grace present as long as possible, and then we'll all pop into the main room for the concluding discussions of the Decentralization Summit. Thanks, Grace.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we had some technical issues, and so I got kicked out and brought back in, and so I'm going to try and do the most conservative presentation I can, and it's all going to be about governance, so it's extremely relevant, and a lot of the conversations you were having were really interesting, and I was really excited about what you said about, oh, maybe they'll throw out 90% of it, because one of the things that happens in life is that we start down a certain path, and then once we're starting to do it, even if it's not working or it starts getting really complicated, or we find we're reinventing the wheel, like in the case of DAOs, right? We're kind of reinventing holacracy, and we were trying to create something new, and what happened? And so how did that happen? But if we're willing to say, okay, maybe we started on the wrong track, and what if we started from a different place? I started with the Arab Spring, and I'm Israeli, and I thought, oh, it's good to overthrow your dictatorship, but I got nothing to recommend, right? Like, our democracies aren't working very well. And I thought, what is governance, and where would we start? And one of the things that I've been struck by in this conference, and it's been fantastic listening to all the talks, including what you guys were just talking about, and I completely changed my presentation because AI gives a completely different starting point to what democracy is about. And the first thing that I have to say is I am not a fan of voting. And I'm going to share this as a Google Doc without putting it into presentation mode, because that might have been what crashed my computer last time. So you're going to see my whole slides, like with the whole giveaway and everything. And we're going to start from the front. So this is called the DAO Gap. And anything about DAOs that you want to find out, you'll find at that website, DAOleadership.com. And I run workshops and stuff like that where you can go through all this stuff. But anyway, I don't love voting. I don't love voting for a number of reasons. One is voter fatigue, which we all know. The other is that voting by its nature is always kind of overriding the minority. Like, there's somebody who isn't happy with it. And voting is very primitive. It's not really how we make decisions. And so there's different ways of looking at that. And you guys were just showing onboarding. So, onboarding, like when you go to a company, you go to the HR. This is me, not me. It's some person bicycling. And I used to go to HR, and I would always ask, do you have showers? Because I like to bicycle to work. And I would ask it whether it was true or not. I did like to bicycle to work, but it would always tell me something about how their operations work. Like, yes, you've got a shower, or most of the time it was like, no, I'm not sure we could work something out. That's impossible, or we can work something out. And it would tell me something about how the organization works. And I have this little next slide about, well, this is onboarding for a company, right? Here's onboarding for a DAO. But you guys just showed a really good mural board, which was so much more complex than what I'm showing here, that it really gives people this idea of like, oh, I'm going to onboard and I'm going to go here and I'm going to go there, and there's going to be this whole thing, and I don't know if I'm a good fit or not until about a month in. Very different from onboarding. But then the question is, like, if you had AI, how would you onboard somebody? And I talked to an AI company. Actually, they talked to me several years ago about actually releasing what they were doing to the DAO space. And so I had this great insight on this, and they had a few talks about it, but they kind of have never released it. But this is what they would do. They had a Trello board. You guys showed Trello board-like things. And they would go to anybody who was interested in working there. They started with internships with people who are studying AI, of course. And they said, this is our Trello board of all the tasks that take less than 3 days that we're not getting around to. And you can take any of them and just go for it. and we'll pay you for that, or we'll give you a certificate that you were an intern at our company, which was really good payment for these people. And she said like 60% of people didn't finish the task. Here you are being led into the company. Let's see how you fit in with our company and whether you get things done. And you get all the resources. Who do you talk to, and what do you do, and where's the repos? And so that already eliminated 60% of the people who thought they wanted this profession. And then they would assess the other ones, and they'd collect information about them. And if they were good, they'd move them to the next Trello board, which is like the beginner tasks, and so on and so forth. So that actually what they had was Kanban board types of things. You could do it in Jira or whatever you're using, where everybody gets to prove themselves and work with certain people and move up in that way, which sounds quite DAO-like if you think about it. And you're moving up based on merit. And so that's the onboarding process. And those three onboarding processes are really different. And if you're thinking about how AI systems work and really implementing AI, you don't start with voting. And so here's a decentralized system that we're all familiar with, right? This governance system governs our body, and it does a good job. And it has a regulatory system, it has some decision-making systems, and they're all kind of separate, and they work in harmony with one another by using different types of regulation, different types and they have different languages. Each one of these systems, our skeletal system and our circulatory system and our respiratory system, they have different languages and different ways they communicate among themselves. They have different goals. So you guys were showing, okay, well, we've got these holocratic systems and each team is doing something else. And one of the really important things about them is the regulatory system. Because, let's face it, when we're talking about AI, there's some dystopian futures. And this is one of the things that DAOs are horrible at. So one of the DAOs I was looking at is Bankless DAO. And the way also that you were showing that Miro board, it's great. It's like every team has autonomy and they know what they're doing, and they're producing what they're producing and doing what's inspiring them and working within their budgets, and they know who the good people are, and it's good. You've got kind of Dunbar number minus groups of people so they can all know each other and work together. But safety is really important, and ethics are really important when you're talking about AI. And it's very exciting to think about how we can start having much better decentralized systems of making decisions about what could possibly go wrong with our network. And I think this is one of the essential things we need to be thinking about with AI systems, is where is the authority of that group of people who are the Ethics and Safety Commission? And how do they get a sense of what's happening in each one of these teams? And, Jan was talking today about the different projects, and, they get funded and there isn't an oversight. And who knows what data set they're using, and who knows what, and he can't manage that. And this kind of oversight is extremely important. And I'm not sure how to answer that with a DAO, but since, my topic is the missing functions, this is really important. But let me go back to this, what a DAO would do, an AI DAO would do with this example of this company. And what they did was they used a lot of these plot examples, like these are just ones I pulled off. But basically it would be something like, as people were employees of the company, they would be able to see where they were in comparison to other employees, let's say in how much code they put out, how many projects they'd worked on, which of their projects had succeeded in, being used by the customers, and which of their projects were not succeeding with the customers. They would be able to see, even based on their chats on the Slack, how much they were talking with others, communicating with other people. They could see, there were different diagrams that could show which individuals were communicating with other individuals, and they were color-coded, so you could see which departments were communicating with other departments. And you could really get a sense of people's place in the company and what they were really producing and how they were communicating, and with another natural language model, which they never ended up implementing, or at that time they hadn't implemented yet. I'm sorry, I didn't get all the pings to turn off. And what they were implementing, and if you could see all of those things, I can't get my one ping to turn off, and I don't know why. Sorry about that. I'm really unclear about this noise. Sorry. All right. So what they could see is where they were stood in terms of the organization, in terms of you know, their peers, in terms of their departments. They could see all these different graphs, and you could know what you were being rated on. So for example, this company had taken a decision that was an important strategic decision. They said, even if somebody's the best coder, if they're not communicating well with the rest of the company, if we don't see them on the Slack above a certain threshold, we're gonna have them leave, because we've decided that one of the thresholds is you have to communicate. It doesn't matter if you're the best coder. We've decided as part of our company that we really want people to be communicating with one another. And if you put another layer, like I was saying, of, you know, language understanding, you could start to understand what people were talking about, whether it was just gossip or whether they were speaking about the work. For example, they were able to find out that women were participating less in the Slack than the men were. And they were able to remediate that within the DAO. Well, it was a company, but it was a DAO-like structure. And then when salaries would come around, they would all be able to, like, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Coordinate. And Coordinate, for those of you who haven't, is a system whereby every week people give points to the other people in the DAO, and then the money, the salaries, are distributed according to the number of points. I mean, they call them tokens, but it's a Web 2. It's actually a Web 2 application. It's not really tokens. So percentage-wise, you can say, all right, I think that my colleague has done a good job, or they've created a tool that I'm really using. And they use that for their bonuses at Coordinate itself, like above their base salary, but you could use it for all of the salaries. And by knowing how they felt about each other's contributions, they were able to make decisions about who got promoted, who became a product manager, all of those kinds of things. And the same went for decisions about what to fund. And again, this is something that we're doing by a voting system and a discussion system. But what happened in their organization is people would just gravitate. So you've already hired these people based on their abilities and based on your budget. So you've got X number of people in the organization. And then each project manager or individual, anybody could say, I've got an idea and I want to develop this. And they could go into these graphs inside of the company and say, here are the people who aren't super busy on another project, or their project might be ending soon. Here are the people who have the skills that I want. These are their rankings in the company. And you could try to recruit people to your project, to your AI project, or whatever else it was. And if you had a good reputation and they could see your reputation and your idea was appealing to them, then they came over and they did your project. And you didn't need some outside voting system. Like right now, the people who vote and the people who develop the products are completely different people. Here it was the same. So you might need two different mechanisms, one for people who are using products and one for people who are developing products, which of course they did. They had a customer base, and the customer would be asking for features, and then the salesperson would be the person with the idea. So you might need a mechanism to fill in for that. But they never needed any kind of budgeting or oversight or any of those other things, because it was all done naturally. Like if we knew so-and-so was kind of not a great project manager, nobody wanted to work with him, no matter how good his idea was, people wouldn't come over there. And he would learn that really quickly and say, I'm not going to manage the project, I'm just going to be the ideator. And you could have a flowing system. Now, the fascinating thing about this company that did this was that they had researchers come in, and the researchers were trying to figure out about decision making. And the researchers could never find the decision points. They're like, we looked for decision points, moments in time when the decisions were made, and we couldn't find them in the data. And of course, these guys kept really good data, right? And if you think about this governance system, your human body, there isn't a decision point. I mean, we think there is, right? Like we think, oh, I'm going to go decide what to have for lunch. But actually, whatever's in your refrigerator is already a subset of everything that could be for lunch. And whatever's in your refrigerator also was the day that you went out and what's going bad and whether it had too much packaging and you're more environmental and what you were thinking when you were at the supermarket and the supply chain and how far it had to be transported and what the price of, and you're not making the decision that you think you're making at the moment you're making that decision, which is why I don't like voting. And I'm talking to you guys about this. I really haven't given this talk at all to anybody because you guys are talking about AI all day. And if you can start to create these systems like the ones that I was talking about, like these built-in oversight, built-in ability to have, make sure that every team has an ethics person on it. And that ethics person would be, well, I don't know, he'd be like the nervous system on the end of my tips of my fingers. So if something weird was going on with that project, because this ethics person was allocated to this project, he might bring in another 5 of his buddies because right now we need to bring in more circulation to the system because this particular project has gotten to a point in the AI knowledge where it might pose an existential threat or where it might be used against other AI that poses an existential threat. I think the only way we're going to get out of this AI dilemma is to have AI that patrols the other AI. But who's going to make that? And this is why I'm so excited about the Singularity NFT project, because it has the potential to have ethics committee, and it has the potential to implement these types of systems instead of like, let's just have human voting and, as much as we all like Miro boards, something more sophisticated where we're actually matching the right people to the right projects. Because again, if you think about the proposal making mechanism in the DAO, the person who thinks of the idea might not be the best person to execute on the idea. And the person to execute on the idea when it's a baby idea might be a totally different person than you need when it starts to expand. And you're creating a DAO that has the limitations of a bureaucratic or hierarchical system when it's completely unnecessary. If you could create much better flow of the individuals and the projects and AI system that knows how to match the right people with the project and individuals who are able to transparently see who's doing what and who would they like to work with and what are the actual production values of each person. Well, you can build all that stuff in. I know you're also working on reputation systems. I have a whole theory about that and some ideas around that. But those are the kinds of things that the current systems haven't even considered. And like I said, I think this particular project has the values and the ability to really go a lot further in terms of what's possible in filling in these gaps of what governance could really be if we didn't start thinking, oh, governance is about voting. So I guess that's the shortened version that fits into this time slot. I don't know if there's anybody here who can ask questions, but I'm not sure who's actually still in the room.
Yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you so much, Grace. That presentation was really stimulating. It's so exciting to see all the different directions that we can look at governance from. How to have this onboarding, how to have better voting, more fair voting, so you don't have whale taking over, how to be scalable, how to not think of governance as voting is a great perspective. And then, of course, you speak to our special passion of AI in decentralized governance. How can we not only be decentrally governed, but also be creating systems of fairness, of democratization, of spreading out the opportunities through building AIs that are useful, right? We need to solve our own problems with decentralization, our own challenges, and how can we build systems and technologies that help everybody else who's experiencing those problems within decentralization. It's a fascinating look. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you.
You seem like yeah. Oh my God. 10 words to you so far, but you seem like a person who really thrives in the space of unknown, but that's very thrilling and exciting for you. The more unknown a space, the more exciting. Is that accurate?
I don't think it's that. I think I create the unknown. Because the big thing is, how do we unlearn what we've already learned? Because if we start with voting systems, like you can see what happens, we're just piling something on top of this voting system. And we never stop to think, what is voting? And where is it appropriate? I mean, if you belong to any organization today, and you do, you belong to a family, you belong to this organization, you'll notice how many times you vote is never. Never.
Right.
Why
Right.
would we base an entire structure of governance on something that we know that we never use?
Yes.
And
And
that's
we
why it's
rarely like,
unusable. Yeah,
we rarely like unless we're in the majority, right?
exactly. And we don't, and it's just, if somebody says, let's vote on it, they either mean, I don't want to talk to you anymore, or this conversation, or this is not really important enough for me to worry about. That's when somebody says, let's vote on it.
When we have really clear shared values, when we know where we're going and why, we may each have our own individual values, but they match if we're here in a shared organization. That's why we're all here together. When we have those shared values, that shared vision, that shared future, even if we don't know how to get there, or even what it looks like, but we know where we want to be, we can work towards a solution that works for everyone. That's how families work, right? We are moving in a shared direction. Sometimes parents aren't that way, but generally we're all
Even
moving
if
as a
we
unit.
don't, like, even if we don't have a shared vision and shared values, which is most of the time, when we have a system that can sense, like, what is the right, it's not like, do my heart and my lungs have the shared values? No, but they got to work in collaboration. And if you jump in ice water, for example, you'll notice that all of your blood will go to the middle of your body. And your hands really think that's a bad idea, but it's the only thing that, but without your heart, your hands won't work, right?
But the hands still want me to stay alive. My muscles want me to stay alive. And so they're willing to give up that blood to, they don't sucker down and hold on to that blood so that my heart, so there is a shared value. As long as we know that biggest shared vision, we're looking for this vision of the future where everyone participates and everyone benefits, instead of this manipulative power over agglomeration type future. And we may have different visions of what that looks like. But when we understand that, and we trust that everybody else is here in the room for that, then like this summit, we all come together with our different visions to align toward in a direction, which is just beautiful. I want to ask a question from the chat. Nori was
Okay.
asking or saying, the body analogy you used is really interesting. So the body is a system that eventually dies. Should we consider building governance structures that include a mechanism for obsolescence, radical reinvention by design?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you do that with companies. It might be just this department disappears or whatever, but I think that one of the craziest things about blockchain is that it's going to be forever. And I mean, that's just absurd. I mean, like, we know that that's absurd. We're all adults in the room, right? And so, yes, you should have planned obsolescence, and we can see that. That's why our current governance systems are completely crumbling, is because we never had a system that would turn over. And if you look at the best educational system in the world, for example, Finland, every 10 or so years, they completely restructure it and they look at it from the bottom up, because any system that survives needs to have planned obsolescence. Absolutely true.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And we don't go back to first principles. And at this juncture, with the acceleration of change in the world, it's more important than ever. We have systems, education systems, governance systems that are centuries old and built on systems, as you say, older than that. But we're coming into a new space. Blockchain has made entirely new things possible. The internet, Zoom, AI has this massive gift to bring abundance to so many areas. We were talking earlier with Bethlehem Desi, who does the DigiTruck. Anyone can code in Africa. She drives a truck around to teach girls and children to code in rural Ethiopia. And we're looking at AI in education. You used to have to be in the city to get a good education. You go to a private school to go, or the right country or the right class, where AI, starts to make it so that everybody in the world can have the same level of education. It brings that abundance, and building that on old systems, it's never going to work. And the more we try to cling to them, the more disruption there is. Where, going back to first principles again, values. What do we value? We value participation. We value everybody being heard and having a voice and having an opportunity equally to participate. And then we can, well, what makes more sense than voting? Yeah. What have been the biggest surprises, the magic moments for you in participating in the decentralization space and experimenting and looking at these principles emerge into reality?
Wow. I mean, there's been a lot more disappointments than surprises.
What are your biggest disappointments?
But I mean, I think the biggest disappointment is that we've reinvented hierarchical systems, right? Like we've got like the central DAO, and then we've got something that we're calling holacracy, but actually, and we've reinvented politics in a really nasty way. And you're seeing this industry so male dominated because women communicate very differently. I mean, one of the reasons is, and this kind of disembodied text communication, it favors certain types of personalities,
right?
And also certain age groups of personalities. I kind of can't keep
Right.
up, and so we're kind of like, that's the biggest, it doesn't really work. And we've seen a lot of also text-based communication creates misunderstandings. The most sensitive people, the people who are like myself, like I'm very contrarian. And I was talking before about having an oversight committee, a safety committee, and I work with DAOs all the time. And I was working with one who's working on content moderation. And they have this content moderation DAO. And I'm like, okay, but if you're only going to get rid of they're going to get rid of like the worst horrifying things, like everything else is allowed. I'm like, well, you can't have people being exposed to that a lot. So how are you going to create a voting system where nobody has to have more than an hour a month where they're exposed to that nastiness? It's not going to be everybody votes, right? And
right.
You need that person who's going to say what could possibly go wrong. You don't want them as the leader of the organization, but you want them around. But in these text-based DAOs, that kind of jerk who always finds holes in the system, they're not going to last long. And so that's been a disappointment, I would say. So, I mean, the highlight is the people, right? I feel like the people really are incredibly positive and believe in the future, and that's the best part.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We need to pop off. Thank you very much for
yeah, no, we gotta get going. That's why I shortened my presentation. So that's
thank you very much.